there's some differences between one Pokemon on the team, but let's just take a look at our first player, Akram. He's going to be Dortmund Regionals Day 2, was in Utrecht Special Event Top 32, was at Worlds in last year, and Stuttgart Regionals. So, a player who's performed quite consistently recently, and, just a player who is quite on the team and who has quite a bit of experience in the circuit, and we can see he's going to be running a team that's been quite popularized now. That's just going to be that standard balance team with the Rillaboom, Primarina, Dragapult, Sneasel, and Electabuzz and Kingambit. And some players have a Magmar over the Electabuzz for that Firewater Grass core.
Absolutely. I mean, the choice between Magmar and Electabuzz is obviously the main one that a lot of players are making in this regulation. I do want to note a couple of things that are a little bit unique here. So obviously most of the team is pretty straightforward to what we'd expect to see, but the Life Orb Primarina obviously being able to put on quite a bit of pressure, right? Your Hyper Voices and Moonblast are hitting quite hard. And then on top of that too, the Rillaboom having access to high horsepower. Usually you'll see Rillabooms with U-turn, sometimes high horsepower. High horsepower is a really nice tool to pressure fire types. Even if you're against an opposing like Sneasel, or potentially you could Terra Fire, respond to it, go for a high horsepower. And I think that it's a really interesting move to have access to, right? It can definitely change up how Rillaboom functions in some scenarios. But going on to the next team, you mentioned it, you're making that choice between Magmar or Electabuzz, and Leung decided to go with Magmar. So this team, very, very similar. The main difference, I think, here is honestly just the fact that the Rillaboom has U-turn. So I will say, actually, having U-turn versus high horsepower, I feel like if you're against the Electabuzz or Magmar versions in the mirror, it's nice to have high horsepower to pressure the other redirector. So Leung kind of operating in a bit of a different way, maybe having to pivot out in situations, where Akram can afford to go for high horsepower. But the Magmar having Terra Fairy is super, super important when you're against opposing Swords Dance Kingambit. You're able to Terra Fairy in front of those Kowtow Cleaves, redirect it. Doesn't have access to Wisp, which is worth noting, but does have Heat Wave, so it can get around redirection from Electabuzz.
Yeah, so Magmar getting access to Heat Wave also means that it's not going to be reducing its own special attack every time it goes for that overheat. So, Magmar also getting Helping Hand, so boosting up the damage. And looking at this, choice band, Terra Dragon, Dragapult, I don't think anything is going to have a very enjoyable time facing maybe, say, like a Helping Hand, Terra Dragon Outrage from that Dragapult. I wonder how much damage that would even do to a Kingambit in its regular Steel type form.
Yeah, Pake also here, I think has a really, really strong list of achievements, right? Hong Kong National Top 16, Hughes Rallied in a win in the World Cup of VGC. I mean, that's a fun fact to have there, right? Liverpool Regional Top 8 and Hong Kong Regional Champion. So no stranger to Pokemon, of course, has a lot of achievements. And when you're using such a consistent team, it gives you so many options. You have so many different ways you can approach the game. So it really is a team that just allows you to do well if you're playing well on the day, right? And one thing I wanted to note as well, the Rillaboom that would be great. But yeah, no, I'm super excited to see this pair. I think it's a super, super strong team, and seeing the mirror match is always really interesting.
Yeah, I always love watching mirror matches just because it's so much fun to see how the players adapt. And we're going to go immediately into the game one. The players are going to lead. You're going to see Kingambit Caesar from and then there's the Electabuzz and Kingambit. So a bit of a redirection on Akram's side, and then Pake going for that immediate pressure, offensive pressure of that fake out, and maybe enabling that Kingambit to get that Swords Dance.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like you do have a lot of pressure here with the Sneasel, or maybe forcing a Terrestrialization, Follow Me Out. But even then, you're pressured by a double up of Close Comment and Kowtow Cleave. I do think that the Sneasel Kingambit lead is putting on a lot more pressure. But if you're able to get that Swords Dance up without trading too much value, it could be a really good situation here. We are going to see Fake Out go into Electabuzz, and Poison Touch is going to activate.
So Electabuzz now on a bit of a timer. It's going to flinch, so no attacks or nothing coming off. And Swords Dance coming off from Akram's Kingambit. So it's either a speed tie or maybe that Kingambit's going to be faster. It looks like going to follow up another Swords Dance. So 2+2 Kingambits staring down at each other. They're probably not going to be, be able to do too much damage to each other. But of course, Electabuzz does have that Follow Me, so it is going to be a little redirect. And keep that King Gambit safe for maybe another turn, but getting maybe another Swords Dance off, or maybe just a Kowtow Cleave just to come out and start dishing out damage immediately.
Absolutely, and a big thing here, right, is even though both King Gambits got Swords Dance up, the Sneasler is putting on a little bit more active pressure here, right? You are forcing a constant redirect from the Electabuzz, and if that doesn't happen, then your King Gambit instantly goes down. Not to mention that there is the possibility of preserving the Sneasler here so that you can close combat the King Gambit later. We are going to see the Sneasler switch out here into Magmar, having both redirectors in front of each other. We'll find out which one's better, and Follow Me is coming out here, likely going to take a Kowtow Cleave.
Yeah, so Electabuzz now going for a play, keeping his partner safe. Kowtow Cleave now coming off onto that Magmar. That does so much damage. Immediate one-hit knockout. The power of +2 Black Grass's King Gambit. Now King Gambit, of course, going to come up with also a one-hit knockout. So it looks like a fairly even board state right now. Just no more redirection for either player. It looks like setting out that Sneasler, and I think Pak Hei might want to think about sending out that Sneasler as well, just to get that fake out pressure back again on the field.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because both redirectors just went down immediately to Kowtow Cleave, and we're probably going to end up in another mirror board state. There is one interesting thing to note there, which is that, obviously Pak Hei had chosen to go for a switch into Magmar instead of going for Protect. Had Protect come out there, you would have been able to get rid of Electabuzz for free without even having to give up your redirector. So potentially from Akram's side, you're pretty happy to see that turn, right? You'd rather take a trade than a situation where you don't get any damage. And we are going to see Terra Ghost be clicked here. Is the Sneasler going to go for Fake Out, or is it just going to go for close combat as well?
Oh yeah, this is going to be a really critical turn, it's basically a mirror match, and I think Akram's King Gambit has gone first twice now, so I wonder if that's an indication that maybe he's got the faster King Gambit, which might come into play later on when we've got, say, two King Gambits just staring down at each other, but both Sneaslers having access to fake Calmies. Are we going to see some fake out wars? Are we going to see some terrestrializations? What are we going to see now? That looks, I think that's Akram's Sneasler going for the Terra Ghost, or is that, I can't actually tell which player's gone for the terrestrialization.
What's the difference, right?
Yes.
I think a big thing here too, right, is with the Terra Ghost, like they are likely to come out from both just because you're trying to avoid the fake out in the mind game, and I think that it kind of just gives you a secure way to close combat the King Gambit, and neither player really wants to take the risk, right?
No. Looks like that. Both Caesars now going for Terra Ghost, so looks like Protect coming off from Pak Hei's King Gambit, just keeping itself nice and safe this turn. Scout out, maybe and the Sucker Punch coming out, so very nice play onto our Caesar, which is of course going to hang on from that focus dash, but are we going to see that close combat come off? No, into the Terra Ghost.
It is going into it. Yeah, wow. I mean, the close combat going into the King Gambit there. So it's a really interesting... goes for Dire Claw instead. So instead of close combating the King Gambit, calling the Protect, and I think, honestly, the play that Pak Hei made was kind of calling out what the play that Pak Hei had also made, right? So it's kind of interesting there. But I feel like in this situation now, there's so much pressure on the opposing Sneasler, and this King Gambit on Akram's side is now a little bit out of control potentially, because the only way to really deal with it at this point is to have to play around that Sucker Punch, which I don't know if you can with the Sneasler when it's down the sash like this.
Yeah, and that Sneasler, of course, on Akram's side, he does not want to take, of course, being Terra Ghost. I think even if it was its regular poison and fighting type, I don't think it would survive +2 Sucker Punch, but it looks like that Sneasler very, very threatened by that Sucker Punch. It's going to withdraw, so trying to revive that fake, get that fake out pressure back on that Rillaboom. Well, of course, what is Pak Hei's Sneasler going to do? Is that going to go for a Protect, or is it going to just go for Are we going to see another Rillaboom come back?
No, it's Prima. Oh, okay. I mean, I think that's probably a bit worse, but does the King Gambit go for Kowtow Cleave on Pak Hei's side? That's the real question. If it goes into Rillaboom, it would be such an impactful turn, but no, it is Sucker Punch coming out. So now Rillaboom in a pretty decent board state here. I mean, you do have to obviously be a little bit careful, right? This Primarina is being pressured heavily by Woodhammer, but maybe if a Protect comes out from Primarina and Kowtow Cleave goes into Rillaboom, that wouldn't be so great. As well, too, you have to be a little bit careful, because if you decide to fake out the King Gambit, Primarina decides to attack, that's heavy damage you're going to be taking on King Gambit in the mirror. And I think that realistically, Prima is just a Pokemon that isn't super threatening the Rillaboom, but can still do some things in this matchup.
Yeah, and depending, I think Primarina, of course, is going to go down to a Wood Hammer from this Rillaboom. There's just no way it's going to be able to survive it. So, there's other mind games, like maybe Akram wants to go with calling, say, Protect. You might want to go for, say, something. Oh, but it looks like Primarina is just going to go for Protect to scout out. And High Horsepower coming out. Does very good damage.
Oh, wow.
Does that, oh!
He just barely survives.
That's so close. And now, does that Rillaboom survive? It does not. So, a very nice turn from Pak Hei here. That King Gambit trained so well. I think that is the slower King Gambit, because I think it's been now the 4th time that it's been outsped. So maybe indicating that King Gambit has a lot more bulk. Or maybe not just more bulk than maybe typically what Akram's got. And surviving.
It's always a situation where the speed tiers are weird, right? Like with King Gambits, I feel like it just comes down to like sometimes you can tell actually by the King Gambit's HP investment on the one on Akram's side, there is a little bit less in HP, so that can imply that you have a bit more speed to try and win that mirror. The really weird thing here is that you have so much pressure here from Akram's side, even though he's at a deficit, because you can Sucker Punch into the opposing King Gambit if you assume you're faster and go for a Dire Claw in the Primarina. And if you're calling the King Gambit to switch, you could also potentially Kowtow Cleave into it. But this is a really awkward situation for Pak Hei.
Yeah, and the King Gambit on Pak Hei's side is in danger of getting Sucker Punch, so the Sneasler is quite free to go for that Dire Claw, and it looks like King Gambit, under so much pressure, is just going to try and scout out what his opponent's going to do. Sneasler going for that Fake Out, so actually allowing the opposing Sneasler to come in for free, and it looks like the Kowtow Cleave coming out. So maybe, Akram predicting that Sneasler switching on the other slot, so going for that Fake Out and Kowtow Cleave. But now that Sneasler has gotten in for free, and there is heavy threat of a Fake Out, and Akram down to his final 2 Pokemon means that he cannot just switch out to reset that Sneasler's Fake Out. And of course, both Sneasler and King Gambit can protect, so that's something that he could do to burn it. And looks like that's Sneasler going for that protect, just trying to burn any super effective hits coming off its way as well.
I think a big thing here too is with the double protect, you're getting to scout out the Fake Out. Pretty much you have a completely safe turn here. I mean, Pak Hei's safest play is Fake Out in the King Gambit, Sucker Punch into Sneasler, which we're probably going to see come out here. Sword Dance actually is what comes out. Now you're putting on even more pressure. I mean, it's a pretty aggressive play, right? I mean, had there just been a single attack coming out here, it would have been a very, very scary situation. But, capitalizing off of the double protect here to get a bit more damage, maybe prioritizing the mirror, being able to do more. That being said, you still are kind of in an awkward situation here, right? Sucker Punch being able to threaten Sneasler, and you can also make the call of maybe like protecting King Gambit, switching out again, making it another awkward mind game. But like even then, Dire Claw's almost always going to go into this Sneasler slot. So I think you maybe have to hope just a Dire Claw status the opposing Sneasler, and or get the Sucker Punch off on the King Gambit. It's kind of a weird situation. I think Pak Hei's in definitely a better situation here because the Sneasler isn't really pressured.
Yeah. Ooh, Sucker Punch coming out. So that King Gambit at +4 isn't going to be able to take any use of that attack boost, which leaves the Sneasler very free to Dire Claw onto this very low HP Sneasler in return.
Oh, wow.
It's not very effective, but that doesn't matter. The Sneasler was so low on health.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like the Primarina is not going to be able to muscle through both the Sneasler and the King Gambit, which is, I think the King Gambit's still at full HP. It hasn't really, or has it? I think I got
it's taking no damage. Yeah, it's taking no damage. I mean,
yeah.
A big thing here too was, I mean, obviously going down to Sash was pretty bad because then it came down to a Dire Claw speed tie if you're assuming both Sneaslers are at the same speed tier, right? So in this situation, it really was just a situation of if the opposing Sneasler goes first, goes for close combat, gets rid of the King Gambit, then you get Primarina in and you hope that you can survive the Sneasler Dire Claw. But because of how the turn ended up playing out, obviously, it was a very tricky situation, right? I think it's definitely a situation where that Magmar going down in the early stages of the game was a really important turn. Sneasler could have opted for something safer, could have gone for a Protect, right? Instead to scout out the turn, but instead opting to go for that switch into Magmar, and that switch just losing your redirection like that, not having the option of even potentially going for a terrestrialization on it later on could have been really good. So I think that was just like the biggest turn of the game, honestly, where the Kowtow Cleave, they traded redirectors, which kind of evened up the value of the game. And then slowly over time, Akram was able to get that advantage.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the thing with Primarina, of course, is that the Primarina was also very hesitant to go for the haze because that meant removing its own King Gambit's boost as well. So the Primarina haze in that situation wasn't able to be fully utilized. And I think, Akram choosing for that Rillaboom, just putting a lot of pressure on it with the double fake out, might have given him a bit of an edge. But it was really good information for both players. I think Akram's King Gambit was able to consistently go first. So I think that's good information for Pak Hei to recognize that maybe in game 2, the King Gambit would lose the Sucker Punch war if they went for that Sucker Punch onto each other.
Absolutely. And one thing worth noting as well too, and I feel like in the mirror that was like really important with their interactions was the King Gambit. I mean, as you mentioned, the King Gambit being faster was really big with the Sucker Punch, but it sets up some really interesting scenarios, right? So we saw that there was almost like this unstoppable move from Akram like later on in the game, which was Dire Claw into Sneasler, Sucker Punch into King Gambit. There's no way you can counter that play unless your Sneasler goes first and gets a close combat off, right? And because Dire Claw went first, Sneasler's gone, King Gambit's gone, game over, right? So I think what you have to be very intentional about is like where you're positioning your King Gambit and how much damage you're allowing it to take, right? That King Gambit being within Sucker Punch range pretty much removed almost any out in the game. And another thing that was really important in that game, which was the result or like how King Gambit got the damage on it, was the high horsepower in the Rillaboom. Is Rillaboom might be a bit more bringable for Akram because of the high horsepower, being able to pressure the King Gambit a bit more and being able to pressure Sneasler a bit more. I'm not sure if Poke could choose to bring it, potentially still wanting the fake out, but you are losing out on that high horsepower pressure, which Akram has access to.
Yeah, so it's going to be really interesting to see how players adjust to the game 2, which is going to be ready. So we're going to jump into that very, very shortly, and let's see how our players adjust to this. So we're going to see Sneasler King Gambit, so same leads from Pak Hei, and it looks like also Sneasler King Gambit from Akram's side. Oh no, wait, so Pak Hei's the one who switched up. Or was it? No, sorry, Akram was the one who switched up because he had Electabuzz in that first game.
Yeah, so a big thing in this match is really going to be like, how do you operate off of this turn 1? So realistically here, you kind of need to put yourself in a position where this King Gambit is more set up than the opponents, but opting to go for the mirror lead this time, I think it's a really important decision to make because you're able to put on a bit more like pressure, right? So even though it is forcing that mind game turn 1 immediately, you are still in a position where now we are on an even playing field. Our redirectors are in the back. How are we going to navigate around this turn 1?
So it looks like Pak Hei not wanting to risk that King Gambit from a close combat is just going to switch out immediately for the Magma. So we're getting that redirector on the field right now, and we're going to see a turn 1 Terastallization. I believe that looks like Pak Hei's player character, so that is going to go for that Terra Ghost, just dodging any fake outs and really wanting to maybe go for that immediate close combat onto the King Gambit.
Yeah, right here, obviously the Terra Ghost being super impactful, being able to get around any potential fake out threat. You're going to see close combat go immediately into the Magmar. I do like the decision to switch out. The only thing you have to be a little bit careful about here is the Flame Body, and the Flame Body activates, notably not going for Vital Spirit on this Magmar, which means you're able to get the burn off and close combat's going into King Gambit and removing it from the field.
Immediate burst. So Pak Hei realizing in that game 1 that King Gambit was just way too threatening, prioritizing getting rid of it, and Magma getting Flame Body is actually going to be quite a crucial decision on Pak Hei's side. So just making sure that every time any physical attacker hits it, there's a 30% chance of a burn, and making it really quite dangerous to go for any sort of physical hits onto that Magma.
Yeah, I mean, a big thing here too is that you're able to put on pressure with this Rillaboom with the high horsepower in the situation. If you opt to go for a Terra Fire here, you're able to sit in front of a Dire Claw, as long as you don't get put to sleep, of course, right? Or paralyzed, and you're able to potentially pressure the Magmar with the high horsepower. That being said, though, Akram at such a disadvantage. Losing your King Gambit like that is really bad in this mirror. You want to be able to put on that pressure, and it does feel like with the burn down as well, it's just such an uphill fight.
Yeah, the Sneasler now, its damage output is heavily nerfed, and I think at this stage, the Sneasler's main use will be trying to spread as much status moves onto Pak Hei's side as possible. Rillaboom now going for that Terra Fire, so maybe not wanting to get burned from any flame bodies anymore, but Magma just keeping itself safe from any potential high horsepowers. Instead of going for that protect and close combat now, going into the opposing Sneasler, maybe predicting a switch back into the King Gambit.
Oh my god, and Dire Claw activating. I spoke it into existence here. The Paralyze coming out, but you are going to get the Wood Hammer off. And I do think that's really important, getting Caesar down the sash, but you still have the pressure of this redirection from the Magmar, and the Magmar is just so impactful here. Not to mention, I just think in this situation, right, when your Sneasler is burned, the lack of damage output is just so scary here. I mean, you have so much trouble getting through this Magmar. Your Rillaboom's in range of Dire Claw. This is already looking like a very done deal for Poké, or for Akram, rather.
And there's a very, very healthy King Gambit just sitting in the back, waiting to come back once the Sneasler has been removed from the game. Of course, there's still, we can see Akram has one more Pokemon. We can see it's Electabuzz, which isn't really a Pokemon you want leaving as a final Pokemon, because it really doesn't have that much damage output besides the Electro Web. So I think, Akram's best choice right now is maybe trying to spread a lot of status through his opponent's teams with Poison, and, trying to get that Electabuzz to keep his teammates safe.
Yeah, I mean, here maybe also you could potentially, because it's not Vital Spirit on the Magmar, you could also hope to just sleep it, right? and then start getting status and everything else. It's gonna be the Para coming out here, so I mean, I'd say probably the third best status you can get, but at this point, you can't really complain, right? You kind of need anything to come back in this game. Electabuzz taking a little bit over half, but kind of implies it might be a little more specially trained. I mean, Caesar did quite a bit of damage there, and usually you would expect Electabuzz to take that a little bit better.
Yeah, this Sneasler has put in a lot of work on Pakei's side, knocking out that King Gambit in one hit, putting that Electabuzz down to half health. Of course, it is going to get some health back from that grassy terrain, but Electabuzz now doesn't really have any attacking moves. It can go for that taunt onto the Magma, just prevent any more follow me's, but looks like Sneasler's now going to withdraw, so are we going to see maybe a King Gambit coming back? And it's going to be a King Gambit. Has Akram called it and then gone for that close combat onto it? But it's a Dire Claw onto the King Gambit. So fantastic switching from Pakei's side.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, right, it's just kind of about how you carry out the rest of the game, making sure that you maintain your advantage, right? Heat Wave coming out here. At this point, you're just kind of building up some chip. I do think Magmar is in a position where these Heat Waves are going to be kind of getting you quite a bit of value. I think this really is a situation where Akram is, doing the formality, playing out the situation, but there are very few ways you could really bring it back at this point. This full health King Gambit coming out is very scary. However, there is one potential play that could potentially maybe put this game a bit more even, which is the Magmar gets paralyzed, you get the close combat off into the King Gambit, but even then it's still a little bit tricky, right?
Yeah, we see Akram actually going for that Electro Web onto that King Gambit, which is going to give it a +2 Defiant boost, so that King Gambit's Sucker Punches is going to start hurting a lot once it gets that boost. So we're going to see, I think, Akram still trying to fight out, and it looks like Sucker Punch coming out immediately and doesn't even need the boost. Critical hit to add salt to the injury, but I don't think that critical hit matters with Sneasler. I think it was at -1 from a close combat, or has it gone? I think it's gone for a close combat, but that looks like Electro Web giving that King Gambit. That is going to very much enjoy having that. Oh, but Magmar actually does going to get paralyzed, but I think at this stage, it's very, very heavily in Pakei's favor. I think Akram might just be wanting to use out these final turns to strategize about a game 3 and how he might approach that game.
Yeah, it might be a little too little too late. I will say, King Gambit probably appreciating that Electro Web more than it doesn't like it. This game really, it was so funny because turn 1, the moves were locked so quickly and instantly it just went so wrong, right? I feel like in the mirror you have to be a little fearless, but maybe you also have to try and look for plays that are securing you, basically you want to be able to play the game from turn 1, right? And that turn 1 play was just so risky. If you get punished on that, you just instantly lose the game. And I mean, you saw the result of that, right? Like the King Gambit instantly went down. It was just not a good situation from the start. And I think maybe needing to play a bit more conservative for game 3, especially because you want to keep that King Gambit alive.
Yeah, I think Akram was maybe predicting his opponent to go for something like a fake out and a Swords Dance, so wanting to capitalize on that, trying to get that Swords Dance back on his own King Gambit, but of course getting punished with that close combat. So, game 3, maybe both players are going to try and conserve their King Gambits, because I think that is a bit of a win condition for both players. Whoever's King Gambit is going to be set up and is healthier is going to have quite a heavy advantage, and also keeping their redirectors fairly healthy and being able to redirect attacks is going to be quite crucial.
Yeah, I mean, something worth discussing as well is I think the Magmar having access to Flame Body, Usually you're so used to seeing Vital Spirit on these Magmars, so you don't even like think twice about it. But then you see Magmar comes in, Sneasler gets burned, you're like, oh wow, like that's like really bad, you know?
Yeah.
So I think the Flame Body is just so impactful in that matchup. And if you're able to even get an activation once or twice, because of how many physical attackers there are on both sides, you're just putting yourself at such an advantage. Not to mention that heat wave pressure, if you're able to get a burn and then be able to take another hit, get a heat wave off, hit the King Gambit, hit the Sneasler. There are just so many good ways that Magmar can be utilized in this matchup that I do feel like gives it the edge over Electabuzz here. You don't really want to be clicking Electro Web, you want to be clicking Heat Wave.
I agree. So let us go into this game 3. Our players are ready, and we're going to see how the adjustments are going to be made from either side, and whether or not, which King Gambit is going to reign supreme. So once again, it's going to be King Gambit and Sneasler versus a complete switch up of Rillaboom and Primarina.
Yeah, Akram opting to go for a completely different lead, probably wanting to remove the risk of the turn 1 that happened in the previous game. But I'm curious if it's a little bit of an overcorrection, because this lead is pretty weak to Sneasler. You do have high horsepower, which does give you an advantage here, but if Terra Ghost comes out and a Dire Claw comes out immediately, this could be a really bad situation. Not to mention, King Gambit is more or less free to click a Swords Dance here, because it's not exactly worried. It could get doubled up by high horsepower and a Moonblast, but even then Dire Claw is still putting on so much pressure on both Pokemon.
Yeah, Akram leading with Pokemon that are both weak to Dire Claw is really scary. Of course, it does have the fake out pressure, but as you called earlier, this Caesar is Terra Ghost. If it goes for that Terra Ghost, it's not really going to care about getting fake out. And King Gambit, if he goes for Swords Dance, sure, he can worry about getting Haze, but if Primarina goes for the Haze, then that's a time that it is not a time. Oh. we see that Terra Ghost coming up from the Caesar, just making sure it's immune to any form of fake outs. And I think you're going to see a Dire Claw come out. So the question is...
Oh, and fake out goes into it!
Sucker Punch is going to come out, actually, but it's going to fail. So it's like but close combat. So maybe calling for possibly a potential terrestrialization of this Rillaboom, but it still does really good damage. Now, Moonblast is enough to knock it down to its sash. So, this Sneasler now on quite a bit of a timer, and it's going to go down to a Grassy Glide from this Rillaboom. Of course, Caesar does have access to Protect, and it could also just switch out.
Yeah, I mean, a really interesting thing to note here, which I think is so impactful, is even though you got the Terra Ghost turn correct, you baited out the fake out properly, no Dire Claw means you really weren't able to capitalize off of that free turn. And going for a Sucker Punch there, you also didn't get a Swords Dance up. So kind of maybe a bit of a I guess maybe like mispredicting like what the Rillaboom and Primarina were gonna do, potentially maybe predicting a Terra Fire and high horsepower. So going for that Sucker Punch and close combat, but even then, it's a pretty risky play to make, and at this point, your Sneasler is very pressured, which is very scary in this mirror.
Yeah, and I think if Caesar hadn't gone to the close combat, it probably wouldn't have been knocked down to its sash, but we are going to see that Magma come out now, so we just wanted to keep the King Gambit safe. Does Flame Body activate? It does.
Does it activate?
No, it's critical. Oh,
it does!
The critical hit had me there, but it's like, that Rillaboom's damage output is going to be heavily out, but Magma also taking heavy damage from the switching in, but Kowtow Cleave now coming off immediately, so removing that Rillaboom off the field, I guess that burn didn't really matter, but it looks like King Gambit still not set up, but still able to do very decent damage with those Black Glasses.
Yeah, I mean, also too, with the burn, right? You would look at it, you'd be like, oh, great situation. And then it just goes down. So you're like, okay, it didn't really make a difference. But I do feel like there was a missed opportunity here to go for a Swords Dance, right? Had you gotten the Swords Dance up, you might have been able to put on a bit more pressure with this King Gambit. I also want to say it's actually really impressive Magmar was able to survive that double up, right? It was quite a bit of damage considering the crit and the Life Orb Prima, but Magmar is just such a bulky Pokemon. The real thing is here is, can you get up the Swords Dance in time? And is the deficit that you took by having your Sneasler go down so low, is it something you can recover from?
Yeah, the Magma, of course, it can go for a follow me, but I don't think it's going to want to in the face of a Primarina that's got access to Hyper Walls. But it's actually just going to go for the Helping Hand. So are we going to see a Sucker Punch just come out immediately? But actually the taunt from the Electabuzz coming off of the King Gambit. So just making sure that, but looks like with the Helping Hand, it's probably was going for an attack. But Hyper Walls coming out first takes that King Gambit down to really low health. And we're going to see a Kowtow Cleave, but onto which Pokemon?
I think it might be into Electabuzz here, just trying to get rid of it as quickly as possible, doing quite a bit of damage. Now, the only way that Follow Me might have impacted that game is maybe had Follow Me gone out and Swords Dance had come out, but the Helping Hand there a little bit of a safer play, right? You're able to kind of cover for the fact that there might be an Electro and Hyper Voice coming out trying to get the KO. Maybe Kingambit survives on one, counts out Cleave, knocks out Electabuzz. Even in this situation, you're still able to get a bunch of damage. This is a very weird situation as it stands, right? You have your Kingambit, which is getting redirected, so you can't exactly get rid of Electabuzz before Dire Claw connects on Primarina. So, but basically, like, Dire Claw is going to hit Electabuzz before it can hit Primarina. So in this instance, it's really just a game of, like, how can I get rid of Electabuzz before I Dire Claw so I can hit the Primarina? And if you can't do that, I'm not sure if there's a way to do that. But Primarina coming in from Pocket's side.
Yeah, Primarina nice and healthy. It looks like a Protect coming off an Electabuzz. I think that might just be a double Protect off Akram's side, or maybe Primarina going, yeah, so double Protect. Just trying to burn that turn off Fake Out off the Sneasler. And, you know, quite a nice turn for Pak Hei here, allowing that Primarina to come in without taking any damage. Of course, the Primarina on Pak Hei's side might get hit by the Electro Web coming off from this Electabuzz next turn will probably knock out the Sneasler and make the Primarina slower than Akram's Primarina, so allowing Akram's Primarina to get that edge. But at this stage, I think, you know, Primarina, I think the Electabuzz probably will live a Hyper Voice from the Primarina, although it is Life Orb, so I'm not entirely certain of how much damage it will take, but maybe the Electabuzz might survive on just a one hit if it doesn't get hit by a Die Claw.
Yeah, I mean, a big thing here that I like from Pocket's end is that you were able to get in that Primarina, right? That is a really good call out on the double Protect here, and Caesar going for a Protect here means that you might be able to get rid of this Electabuzz safely going for a Hyper Voice or a Moonblast. Once you're able to get rid of this Electabuzz, one of the biggest, honestly, obstacles to just being able to Dire Claw the Primarina is gone, but the critical hit on the Primarina, bringing it so low, this will mean it knocks itself out with Moonblast. That could be okay. Maybe, but I don't think it's actually that great because now you lost your Primarina for essentially just getting a knockout on Electabuzz, and now you're super pressured on your Sneasler.
Yeah, that critical hit was quite huge, and now it needs Pak Hei down to his final two Pokemons, a heavily chipped Kingambit and Sneasler, and of course the Rillaboom went down. Sorry, I thought I was thinking of it earlier, but it looks like, you know, both Kingambits are going to be dragged out on both the play side, but Pak Hei's Sneasler is in range of a Sucker Punch, and Kingambit on Pak Hei's side isn't boosted, so it's not going to be knocking anything out in one hit.
This should be a locked win condition because we know that Akram's Kingambit is faster from the previous games, right? Which just means you have a very safe Sucker Punch into Sneasler. Your Primarina is not in range of a Sucker Punch from, the opposing Kingambit, and that just means that you could fire off a Sucker, fire off a Moonblast here, and we are going to see Akram taking the win despite having a lead that could have gone really poorly. I mean, there were two Pokemon that were really weak to Dire Claw, but just being able to push past it, play very aggressive, and be able to close out the game.
Another critical hit just to seal up the game there, but by that stage, it didn't really matter. But really, really well played from both players, and we saw a lot of really crazy adjustments. You know, players